right. That looks like we're good. Looks like we're live now. So we're good to go.
All right.
All right. So if anybody's joining in, we already got people kind of popping on. So we'll have, I usually have a pretty good crowd that comes on these lives, and then we'll share it out both video and audio wise, and people can be able to hear it on their cars and stuff like that. And so you guys have seen a little bit of introduction of Patrick. Patrick's been with me since he's a little kid. And now he's a father, husband, and a school owner himself. And the reason I brought him on, guys, is because I think we always talk about some real talk. He's got some real adversity that he passed in his own life. And to become where he's at today is a testament to perseverance for sure. So with no further ado, this is Patrick Prager. Patrick, I'm going to go ahead and have you, introduce yourself. Let them know you're married and about your child and kind of that part of it, so everybody can know who your wife is and your children. All right. So with no further ado, let's go from there, Patrick.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Patrick Prager, and I've been training with Mr. Cox since late 95, early 96. So it's been over 25 years, 26 years now, which is the giant majority of my life. So he's definitely kind of a second father to me. I've been living in Chatsworth my whole life. About 5 or 6 years ago, after teaching for Mr. Cox for many years, I decided that I wanted to go open up my own school. So with his blessing and with his support, I opened a school up in Santa Clarita to kind of help expand the American Tang Soo Do Alliance that direction. Because at that time, there weren't any Tang Soo Do schools kind of associated with our alliance here over in that area. I also have, like Mr. Cox mentioned, I have my wife and my daughter. My daughter is turning 2 this year. So that's been a whole nother experience. Having a kid for the first time, you have a lot of ideas, especially if we're talking about martial arts. You have a lot of ideas about what parents should do with their kids until you have a kid of your own, for sure.
Yeah, I have experienced that. I thought I was the ultimate parent when I had no children in the beginning, and thought I was really, really brilliant on how to tell others to how to raise their children.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a myth for sure. I look back on it now, and I remember kind of being in restaurants and going, "Man, my child would never be acting like that." My child never did not act like that after I had one, So we just started to be, going out. We just said, we ain't going out with you guys. That's what's happening. So say hi to Ronnie. Ronnie's on here. Have you ever met Ronnie, Patrick?
Yeah,
Ronnie Camacho?
I was there when Ronnie went and he talked to one of the black belt teams.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was there. I introduced myself, and we're kind of Facebook friends, but I love seeing all his posts. He's a very inspirational guy.
He's a cool cat, man. Yeah. He's a good friend. He's a good dude. I don't want your head filled up too much, Ronnie, but you're a good guy. So let's talk about the early times, man, where you did. Sure. So you were in Chatsworth. I was on the corner of Lassen and DeSoto. Why don't you tell everybody, we've told the story before on how you started to come to martial arts, or had your parents come in and bring it to me. Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah. Well, I tried all these other sports. I was every sport in school I played. It had seasons. I went to a Catholic school, so they had seasons. They had volleyball season and basketball season, football season, all that stuff, soccer season. Mm-hmm. I played baseball, but nothing really hit for me until I saw your school in the corner there. So we just kind of randomly, because you were close to our house, came in and did a trial lesson. And I was there for a couple months before the story I think you're referring to here. We had a really good family friend, Stanley Z, who went to that same school with us. And we were in this after-school program and playing around. I'll say playing around, Mr. Cox. And we were running around with this. You always forget this foam baseball bat. You like to say baseball bat.
Was it a baseball bat?
It was a baseball bat.
Okay,
you're right.
So I wasn't lying.
And I'll just say we got a little rough. We were hitting each other back and forth with that baseball bat. and I was just a very new white belt at your school at that time. And of course, the school called up Stanley's parents and mentioned, hey, we got to let you know that the kids are playing around and your son got hit by a baseball bat. So the first thing they did was give you a call and say, listen, this kid we helped bring to your school, he's running around hitting people with baseball bats. So of course I got pulled into the office and got a little talking to, I'll just say.
Yeah.
But it was a learning experience.
Yes, I remember. I love telling the story too, because I do embellish it a lot more than what it really was.
But that's the fun way to do it.
Right. That's true. I'm not going to, yeah, I remember it well, for sure. Carson's saying hello.
Hey, Carson.
Do you? Looks like Ronnie's on with us. It's good that Ronnie gets to talk. He's a pretty busy dude, so it's awesome that he's on here. So,
yeah, thanks for watching.
So when you did this, I remember now. So you were right down the street from me, and back then, I think you started with me. I don't even know if I had children yet. Did I have Michael yet or not? Michael was born in 92. Mikey was born in 1992.
Yes, he was only a couple years old.
Yeah, so he's like little. Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember back in those days with Stanley Z. He's another one, and you guys grew up together in the studio. Stanley Z went on to get a black belt right along with it. Probably, I think he was one of my youngest black belts I ever had. And to see you guys now, 25 years later, I mean, how the years just tick by. And I remember getting calls from your folks saying, hey, you got to talk to Patrick. He's whacking people with baseball bats. And then I used to go and pick you guys up too from kindergarten. Right. I mean, I remember doing that. I remember going to OLV and picking you guys up. And so you just kind of grew up a gym rat, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? And, I look back on those times, and I used to do this all the time. And it was just so, to have that kind of confidence from parents back then. Mr. Cox, and you pick them up today, so then just bring them to the school so they can hang out. I mean, you guys grew up in that, and that's just something Chatsworth did forever. And it looks like it's the same way it is today, even in our school. And I'm sure that you've carried on that tradition where people just come and they hang out, and their kids are there, and they're there for 2 or 3 hours, and the kids are running around, and, it's just kind of a family thing. So I know that this has been something that you've grown up with. Did you always feel like you wanted to have a martial arts school?
Well, I always had kind of two passions, which was art of some form. So that was drawing initially. I became an art major before I transferred into recreation like Michael did. But when I was kind of a teenager and after my health thing that we'll talk about in a bit, I'm sure, I kind of had to make a decision about which direction my life was going to go. And I really just kind of sat for months and thought about it and determined that art for me was more of a hobby and a passion, and it transformed into photography and all that stuff. But the one true consistent in my life was martial arts. And like you mentioned, I was there every day for multiple hours on Saturday from 9 a.m. through all the classes, always staying for demo team. So I was there from 9 a.m. to, 2 p.m. every Saturday for 20 years. Right. So that's just my life. It was martial arts. And luckily I had some support, some family support after my dad passed, to help me do this. So it just really worked out that way.
So that's another thing. Those that are listening right now, I'm not sure you know this, even when your students listen to you, what an avid artist you were. I mean, I remember us having you kind of draw some stuff for us, or you did some murals for me, and you fixed some stuff at the studio here, and just how talented you were as far as drawing goes. And and then then I watched you kind of transition into your photography.
Right.
And, I've always had kind of an art side to myself, but I could never do what you guys do. I'd never had the talent to draw. My children can do it, but I just never could. So it's funny that I've taken up photography this year. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I guess there's just something calming about it to me. You know what I mean? I know I think you've had some artwork now that has even won some prizes. Is that correct? Some landscape thing. What's your what's that look like?
So basically, I kind of inherited my dad's camera, and just growing up, we used to go to all these national parks, 4 or 5 times a year. And this is when your parents would just throw you in the car, and you didn't have a phone or anything, so you would drive 6, 8, 10 hours to go to Yosemite or to
Hmm.
Glacier National Park or whatever. But we always found ourselves at Yosemite as kind of the big one. And my dad was always a photographer. He actually worked in television as a videographer for quite a few years, but he loved film photography. So when we would go to these national parks, especially as a teenager, when you're a teen, if there's something your parents want to do, you want nothing to do with it. So I kind of had a bad attitude about it as a teenager. I just wanted to stay in the car and read or play my Game Boy or whatever.
Hmm.
But then after my dad passed, maybe after like 2 or 3 years after that, I I started to enjoy that again. My wife is a big outdoors woman as well, so we would go together, and I started to realize that when I brought my camera with me, it really kind of changed the experience. It made it even more exciting for me. Right, you go to a beautiful place, and not only are you experiencing it, but now you get to kind of capture a piece of it. So we would spend a lot of time at Yosemite, and I would take many of my photos there. And I essentially, there's something called the Yosemite Conservancy. They put out they're really responsible for keeping Yosemite clean. They do all these cleanup efforts. They get hundreds of people involved in cleaning up the park, and they get all these donations, and they do this competition for their calendar and for donations. So one of my photos won that competition, won the cover for that. AAA also does their monthly kind of magazine, and they do a yearly photography competition as well. And that same photo won that one as well, an honorable mention on that one.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And so now when I started, it's like anything else. But don't you think that photography or anything of that sort, it kind of centers you a little bit? It just kind of coincides with martial arts. You know, the arts just kind of are the arts, whether it's martial arts or it's photography or it's art, it's music, whatever that is. It's such they such intertwine each other, man. It's good. I guess it's a centering thing. I just I don't do it for a living, so I really enjoy it because it's not
Yeah.
really something I have to make money at. So I'm not pushing for it all the time. So I just get to enjoy the process, and it was fun being able to call you up. And I have somebody that's more professional than I am, and I
Yeah.
said, Patrick, what do you think, man? What do you think about my stuff? And
Yeah.
and so where can they see your artwork? I know that you have an Instagram page, right? You
Right.
have an
Yeah. If they go to, it's my initials, PJP. So it's PJ Photoscapes is my Instagram handle. PJ
yeah.
Photoscapes.
So I think
If
what we'll do with that also, you know what you ought to do? You can post comments. Are you on a computer right
Right.
now? On the
Uh,
comments right there, can you see where you can post or not?
yeah.
You
Well,
probably just
I'm on the iPhone, so I'll do
oh,
it on
you're on
my
the
phone.
iPhone. I'll do it right now.
Yeah.
So it's PJ uh
Photoscapes.
Photoscapes. Is this on Instagram?
It is. Yeah. And all my photos are there. I just posted actually in the comments as well.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Yep.
Okay.
They
On
can
on
find
on
all those
IG.
there. Hmm.
Yeah, so I encourage you guys to go see. It's always awesome to see some of they don't some people don't also realize that your brother and you are the ones that came up the ranks. You're both your brother and yourself are black belts here, and
Yeah.
just being um, the Prager brothers were something awesome. And I mean, we had a great experience. I remember one of the most memorable things of you guys. Remember when we got to go in front of the Lakers, right, at
Yeah.
halftime, and we got to do a martial arts show at the Staples Center during halftime. The Alliance did, and the Prager brothers were doing some swords. I mean, I remember that really well. That fight scene from you guys, and uh, you and your brother being able to do this together. So that was awesome. And so
That's great.
it's just to see the correlation. So I just want to make sure people understand that where your art background came from, your artist part background, and your
Hmm.
photography and stuff like that. So we're gonna. And then you went into recreational management, kind of like Michael did. You guys
Yeah.
had the most fun time in college ever. Every time I talk to Michael, I'm like, Mike, so what's your semester look like? Oh, Dad, it's wakeboarding and we're going to be hiking. And I'm like, bro.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, Michael really he really took advantage of all those
yeah, he did.
classes for
He
sure.
yeah, he just loved it. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I mean, you guys can do that. You know, you can be um you know, you can do lots of stuff with it, believe it or not. So it is
Yeah.
what it is, right?
Yeah.
So, oh, wait a second. You know what? Carson said that was his degree as well.
Are you kidding? Wow, that's funny.
If I was ever good to do college, I think I'd go
Yeah.
that route where
It's
I could
awesome.
play. So
It's because you get a little bit of the business too. You know, there's classes about that. I had to write up a business plan, so that's kind of what put the seeds in my mind for writing up that business plan. And I don't know if you remember, but that's actually how I started doing. You had to have internship hours, so I had to get official internship hours with you.
right, I
To
remember
teach for
you
you.
coming to me say, "Hey, I need I need an intern," and of course we did it because I think after that, I think you went off. I don't know if it was Big Bear or something where you were
Yeah.
there running a gym and doing martial arts there. Is that correct?
Yes. So that was kind of just, well, I was still in college. I guess I had just graduated. My dad had just passed away, and I needed a little bit of a change of scenery after that happened. So my father-in-law owned a weightlifting gym up there in Big Bear. So I went up, and after doing the internship with you and learning some stuff, I went to learn a little more of the business stuff, and I essentially ran the gym for him, a lot of the day to day. And I started up a martial arts program there. I had a couple kids as kind of an after school thing. So that was it's kind of these stepping stones, right? The changing from art to recreation tourism management, and then doing the internship with you. And then after my dad passed, going up to Big Bear and running the weightlifting gym, seeing what a day to day gym is like, and starting my own program there.
That's definitely a testament to where you were. So let's talk about, because you had something major happen to you when you were a teenager,
Yeah,
18 or 19, and I remember getting the phone call that you actually had a heart attack.
right.
Um, you know, let's talk about that. What that experience was, and it was that life changing for you.
Yeah, it changed my entire life. So initially, after high school, I went to Cal State Long Beach, and I was in the dorm rooms there, and that's kind of when I first started to experience some depression. My dad had obsessive compulsive disorder, which is an anxiety disorder. So I had a little bit of that anxiety disorder in my family history, and it started to hit me there when I was in college. And I think just the dorm room experience mixed with kind of being unsure where I wanted to go in life, um, I think that contributed to me getting sick. And what happened was a virus, and we don't know exactly what happened, but a virus essentially attacked my heart, the lining of my heart. I got really sick for a week. I came home and took a week off classes, and I was feeling so sick here at home. I started to feel a little bit better. So I drove on a Friday back to my dorm at Long Beach, and I got there, and uh, and then I just wasn't feeling right. I started to feel like some tightness in my jaw, and in my shoulder blade actually was the big one. Almost like the way I describe it was like a vice grip slowly tightening on your shoulder. And I just was trying to roll it out, and I thought maybe if I would stretch or just kind of walk around, but it just kept getting more and more and more intense. So after
Mm,
about an hour of this, I called my mom, and I was just like, I don't know what's going on, but there's this pain. I described it, and she's like, that sounds like a heart attack. But when you're an 18-year-old kid, you know, how do you get a heart attack, right?
right.
So
Mm-hmm.
we had no idea. And she's like, well, listen, I'm just gonna drive over there. So that's like a 45-minute drive, or an hour. So by this point, I'd been having the heart attack essentially for about 2 hours by the time she got there. And we hopped in the car and took me to the ER, and they started, hooking me up to all the EKGs and all that stuff. And they're like, I mean, it looks like you're having a heart attack. So they called in these doctors that were sleeping. Everyone wanted to kind of come see what was going on, because how does an 18-year-old have this? So then they determined it was, and they transferred me to ICU. I took an ambulance right over, and I was in ICU for a couple days. And a vivid memory for me was when they put a line in through your artery in your leg, and the nurse, probably as a throwaway comment, but it really kind of stuck with me there for a couple of days. It was like, hey, you got to be careful. You have a line now in your artery, and if you move, this will sever your artery and you're going to bleed out, right? Which is a weird thing to tell a kid. So I was just kind of like stuck like a mummy, not moving, afraid to do anything for a couple of days there. They released me, and I became a part of this ongoing study, which I think I still am, for trying to figure out what happened, because I think there was a couple of these cases where kids who were young, 18, 19, 20, experienced these symptoms. And years later, they determined it was myocarditis, which is a virus attacking the lining of your heart, mimicking a heart attack, instead of, the traditional heart attack that you might get. But that was definitely a formational experience for me, being that young. And, I'm sure you remember, and especially with martial arts being this part of your life, your physical identity is almost your entire identity. So when you're 18 and you're like peak martial artist, and that was my whole life, to then be sidelined and saying you can't do any physical thing at all for a year, and your body kind of betrays you, that'll send you down into a little bit of a spiral for sure.
Well, I remember vividly about that. Now, let me ask you, so you've hit on several things there where you had a little bit of depression, and did that thing send you into any more depression?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that sent me down into a couple of years of depression, a super dark time in my life. Very dark time in my life. That's when I started taking multiple medical withdrawals from college, because I couldn't finish my semester. There were times, and I feel totally fine at this point sharing this, because I share it with my students a little bit, especially students who experience the same thing. I mean, there were days where I couldn't even walk from the bed to the shower. Just taking a shower was an overwhelming thought that I couldn't experience. And then in your rational brain, you're thinking, how weak are you, right? You
right.
What is wrong with you? There are people that have so many worse things going on in their life. Just go take a shower. Why can't you get to class? And of course, that sends you down a worse spiral. So luckily, I hung in there, and my parents, and specifically my dad, because with his OCD, he had to do some therapy. He started going with me every week, going with me to therapy. And afterwards, we would go have lunch right after. And that combination of a little bit of medication and therapy, and just spending some time with my supportive family, kind of helped me down that track. And this will kind of touch into, I think, something else you're going to want to talk to me about in a second. But unfortunately, right at kind of the tail end of that process, my dad died. And that was a decision point in my life. I could then tailspin and just really let depression take over completely, or I could make a change. And I chose at that point, when I moved to Big Bear after my dad passed away, that, I don't really have the option to be depressed anymore. I have to be kind of the man of the house, for lack of a better term. I have my girlfriend, who I think is going to become my wife at that point. I have some dreams that I want to do that if I don't take care of, that I'm just never going to have them happen. I'll just keep taking medical withdrawals in college, and nothing's ever going to change. So out of kind of darkness there, my dad's passing really kind of flipped a switch in my brain, and had me go forward down this path I'm on now.
Yeah, and we spoke a little bit before this today. So, I mean, I think this is great for everybody to listen to what your story really looks like, because first of all, being a male, and hear that there's OCD, and, there's not a lot of male mental health anyway.
No.
Okay. And that your father already had something, and he probably had a way in to have somebody that was probably working with him also,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And then so this is what was the year? What was the year of Dad's passing?
2012.
2012. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2012, Kathy has some kind of weird, my cat has some kind of a weird virus, right?
Mhm.
Out of the blue. We don't even know what it was. Something in Vegas. And she's in the hospital. And I mean, it was touch and go. And then all of a sudden I run into you in the hospital.
Yeah.
And then you tell me that you said, hey, my dad's not doing well. And I remember saying to you, I said, let me wrap this up with Kathy. Let me go at least see him.
Yeah.
Okay. And, wow, Carson said that's the same year his dad died too.
Wow.
And so, and then I remember you saying he's not doing real well, Mr. Cox. I don't know if we can go in there just yet. And then while we're in the hospital, the next time I see you, you're like, Dad has passed. And I was like, wow, I was just super taken back by it because I remember it vividly. And then so right before the show today, you tell me that today is it's the 9th year of his passing today on this day. We
Right.
just happened to choose this day for your day, and this is the anniversary of your father's passing.
It is.
And so I knew that was super. I remember you having the talk with me, you telling me that you're going to Big Bear, and you're like, it's sink or swim. And if I know me, I probably encourage you, but gave you tough love too.
Yep.
You're going to either
Yep.
listen, Patrick. You're either going to sink or swim now at this time. Depression isn't part of the problem anymore. It is not part of the solution anymore.
Yep.
You know, and and I'm sure your father did not want you having to be in his footsteps. I'm sure I'm not speaking for your dad. I'll let you speak for him, but I'm sure he says, I don't want you living in these shoes like I live in. I want you going past that. And so let's talk about Dad's passing, because I know for Carson too, you two men, I mean, I remember this vividly, and I remember Carson. I remember having phone calls with him too, with his father, and him laying with his dad. Why, that's the week that he was going to be passing. I got to be careful because I'll start tearing up.
Yeah.
But uh, uh, of his dad's passing, and this kind of, I don't know. I guess this is what forged the relationship with Carson, and has forged the relationship with you, is when Dad did. So let's talk about that. The day it happened with Dad, and the talks that you had with your father, how
Yeah.
that changed course for you.
Yeah. I had my dad, and you can attest to this. My dad was like the gentlest guy out there.
Yeah, he was.
He had such a strange manifestation of his OCD. So, what he lived life experiencing was he would see himself reaching out and hitting or running into people or just harming people, and then he would obsess over it. And this would be completely nonsensical because we're talking about, like, he would see his arm stretching 20 feet across the street if there was a pedestrian crossing the other side and hitting them. So that's why he couldn't drive. So I grew up with just my mom driving, and eventually when my brother and I got older, we would drive. I also grew up always walking behind my dad's shoulder, even as like a little, I'm talking like a 5, 6, 7 year old. I would walk behind him because I would have to reassure him if he got stuck in this thought loop that he didn't hit anyone. And of course, he's never hit anyone in his whole life, right? But if we walked by a group of people, and especially if there was kids walking by, he would turn around and just make sure that he didn't harm anybody. And I would have to say, Dad, it's okay. I was right behind you. Nothing happened. You're okay. But there would be times where if we were leaving, let's say like the zoo, right? We got to the car, he would have to walk all the way back into the zoo and sit there for 20, 30 minutes, just making sure that no one called the police on him, that no one was crying or no one was hurt. So this was kind of something I grew up with. But on the flip side, my dad was also one of the few people with that level of an anxiety disorder who held a full-time job for 40 years. He worked at Cal State Northridge, provided a great life for my brother and I, super loving dad. Um, so I don't want to give the wrong impression in that regard, but you know, he also had to, because of that level of anxiety disorder, he had to take a giant cocktail of medication. He was not one of those people that medication was a choice. If he didn't take it, he would just not be able to function, and that'll really do a number on your liver. So that, in combination with you know, sometimes he would have weeks that just he could just barely get through that week. And if you have like one or two beers in combination with that alcohol or with the medication, it's eventually going to start to hit your liver. So we found out probably about 3 or 4 months before his passing that he had cirrhosis of the liver from his high cocktail of medication. Um, and and he was told that he had only maybe, you know, 6 months to a year to live. So I remember being in the house when they told us that, and that's, I mean, when you're 24, 25, and then your parents sit you down and say, listen, your dad's probably going to pass away in 6 months. That's quite a conversation to have.
Yes.
But unfortunately, he didn't even make it those 6 months. He got sick after about 2 or 3 months, went to the hospital. When I first ran into you, he was on the upper floors. He was sick, but he wasn't deathly sick, at least we thought. But then within a day, it went to pneumonia, got into his lungs, and he moved in less than 24 hours from the upper floors right into ICU, had to be intubated, and that was pretty much it. After a day or two, went from talking to him to he had a tube down and he couldn't speak to me, and I could only look at him in his eyes. So that's quite an experience.
Yeah, as a young guy, and but so we don't just be on a bummer note with Dad.
Oh yeah,
let's have some fun stuff with him, because he was a Disney freak like I am.
He was a Disney freak.
Okay,
Yeah.
and he had the most awesome stuff, and they were meticulous he was meticulous on how he had everything lined up. Because I remember being at your house and seeing, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so freaking awesome. He's got every Disney thing on the planet, right?
Oh yeah.
Because he was such a Disney freak. And they were, I mean, when I say, that's one thing about being OCD.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if I moved that thing a little bit, he would know. You know what I mean?
Freak out. Yeah.
He would freak, right?
He would let you move it, and then after you left, he would go back and he would make a little micro adjustment back. You know,
that's so awesome.
He would have known.
Yeah,
he would have watched you do it and been like, "Okay, Mr. Cox, as soon as you're gone, that's it. It's going right back."
So it's funny because, you know, my brother is kind of like that. You know, my brother likes to have his stuff super neat. So if you look at all his books, they're kind of like in the right kind of row and all that kind of stuff. So I'd go in his office and I would push every other book in just to mess with my brother. So, I know that. So I don't want to just end on such a bummer thing with Dad, because it was him and I had that such in common, that how much he loved Disney. Right. And we would talk about it. And he loved his boys, man. We talked about it all the time, and so he enjoyed watching his boys do your guys' martial arts. So, you know, your pop was good, and I know he couldn't be more proud. I know when we were at the funeral that day, matter of fact, you know, I still have pictures on my phone from that day. I think I gave them all to you. I still have pictures, you know, and sometimes the memories pop up on what that was. I'm like, wow, it's already 10, 11 years already, or 9. So I was like, man, this time just goes by, right? I mean, it was just like yesterday, I remember. So I don't want to leave on a super bummer note with mental health and all that kind of stuff, because there was another side of Dad that, just like you said, he worked a full-time job. He was at every one of your tests, okay? Yeah. And we would talk about Disney, and we'd laugh, and he'd come in here and tell me what he needs the boys to be working on. And you know, that it was like it was. And your mom was just a warrior. You know what I mean? And she's, you know, and she still is today. You know what I mean? So just one of those awesome women. So you've just had this great support system, and then here we go. So you've survived all this, and you survived Dad's passing, and you continue his legacy through you, you know, and so does your brother. You know what I mean? Your brother is no slouch. You know, you guys took different paths, and and you both have the part of your dad that's awesome. So I don't want to leave on a super bummer part about dad, because it can get to, see, I'm already tearing up about it because I remember it like it was yesterday. But
Well,
and then what?
part of his obsessive compulsive disorder, and that him seeing him hurting people, is the plus side of this is everyone felt like he was their best friend, because whether it was a waitress or one of his coworkers or somebody at karate, is he would just go up to everybody and just like he would befriend them. He would become their best friend. He would learn everything about their family. Part of that was because he wanted to make sure that they were okay and they weren't mad at him. He wasn't like accidentally hurting them, but he would just go to everybody. He would. I would have him, even when I got older, I would say, Dad, I have a computer problem. Can you call them up? Because he would call the person up. And on the call, he would know like their family's names. He would know the kids' birthdays. He was just so good at just making best friends with everybody. And that was a byproduct of his mental health. So there are definitely positive sides to that for sure.
Yeah, this is awesome. I mean, this is one of those things I made my show for, is to get this to look at some real stuff, because I'm going to have my own son on here at one point, my own son dealing with his mental health, Daniel, for sure. And just to see, young men dealing with it, I'm a pretty type A type of dude, you know what I mean? And so I pretty much suppress all that, because I really, I'm not going to go sing Kumbaya with a group of guys and tell you my feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just not what I do. But, believe it or not, you got some guys in your corner, and I had that. Matter of fact, I had kind of a breakdown not just 2 days ago. Guess who ran to my side? It was Ronnie Camacho.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He drove right to the gym where I was. Yeah, and I guess that's why that to have that support system. And if there's anybody here, you being able to share that's going to hear, some of your young guys or even these young girls are going to be able to hear this and go, wow, Mr. Prager did that. Mr. Prager went through that. Mr. Cox went through that. You know what I mean? And so this is exactly what I'm looking for in this. And it's, and I love all the motivational stuff, right? But underlying through all this kind of depressions talk that we have, there is nothing but motivation to persevere, to win, to look past, to continue a legacy of your father and of yourself. It couldn't be, even listening to you redo it now as a grown man and a father, because now you have somebody else that you have to live for, which is your wife and your children, right? And so, your daughter's going to look to you for strength. And I'm just telling you, from a dad that has a daughter, you are the role model that she should be looking at in a man in the future. You know what I mean? Because there are a lot of knotheads out there and to deal with, and your baby shouldn't have anybody but the best. And so it's good. It's been great listening to this story, how this thing came about. Now from there, so we've got to dabble into your art side, and then of course you're a college graduate and recreational. So it's just kind of been your passion. So I remember us having the conversation. How long have you had your school now?
Opened in October 2016. So 5 years. So
I remember when you came to me and you're like, hey, can I use the curriculum? Can I do all this stuff? And I went ahead and helped you kind of set up, and I was helping you kind of how to negotiate things and and you had a really, your mother-in-law put up something.
Hey, Terry.
Mother-in-law. It's nice. So I remember us talking about this a little bit, and you had your little school and just what you thought. And then here, because I started Simi Valley in a really small location, just like you did. Right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Jay Walker has taken it to the next level. And then you see, Jay Gonzalez started it, was there all the time, and Jay Walker took it over. And then we've expanded, and now you're in that expansion. Let's talk about what it was like as a young school owner, because we can talk about, because I've given you some come to Jesus talks, right? I remember you talking to me, and I'd be like, I just hammer you, right?
Yeah.
And but you took it and then you changed the stuff that, because you know how I am, you guys that have been around me a long time, I'm more of a father figure sometimes than I am
Yeah.
instructor. And then if I don't feel like what you're doing is has the character issue I like, then I'm going to call you in the carpet.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And that's what I did. And you took it and you changed. And so, here you are, you get to expand your school and stuff like that, and which is awesome. So what was your struggle when you first opened your school?
Yeah, my first struggle was starting a school with zero students. I didn't start with like an after school program or anything like that, so that's always tricky to do. But luckily, I had the experience of teaching for you,
Mm-hmm.
teaching after school programs with Kenny through your school as well. Teaching, there was a time for a couple of years where I was teaching from white belt through black belt every Saturday at your school, not including the 2 or 3 days a week. I was teaching like 12 classes a week at your school. So that really set me up. As far as instructional side, I always was very confident in my ability to teach, but being a businessman is a whole nother level. And I think a lot of good teachers um, neglect that side. And luckily, I had the help of my mom and yourself and other people in that arena. Mr. D invited me to seminars with Dave Kovar and going to the Super Show. Um, that could help me slowly learn this business side, which I'm still learning, to be honest. But I think luckily, just the years of experience of teaching at your school, from 14, 15, all the way into my 20s, really set me up to at least offer a level of instruction at the school that kept people sticking around. So even though I had zero students, the ones I was able to slowly attract in the school have stuck around with me. And I'm about to teach. I had my first black belt team with your team 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and now those same students are coming for their second degree, and I have almost all
Amazing.
of them stuck around onto the team. There's one who kind of left for health reasons due to COVID, but all the other ones on that team are going for second degree now. They've all stuck around.
Yeah, I remember. I remember that test. That was stressful, right? Stressful for both
Very
of us.
stressful. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It that was definitely something. And I was glad you guys could piggyback off us so that you can get a sense of what that is. And now it's a privilege for me when I get to go, when you guys invite me. Hey, it's our black belt test, Mr. Cox. Can you come? Because I'm sure you guys talk about me and the students are,
Oh, yeah.
and it's a chance for me to talk about you guys and your journey. So it's been it's been great to see. So let me ask you something. So Carson Fortner, when he was in school, one of his classes had to do a business side of it. Asked about where he was working, what he would do different. And then at that school at that time, he really didn't like the way the retail and stuff was ran in the
Gotcha.
school, right? So he wrote in his paper, "That's something I want to change," and something like that. What do you think? What did you take from the school when you're working here? What did you take that
Hmm.
you thought this is really good, but in my school I'd like to change this? You're
Hmm.
not going to hurt my feelings, so you can just tell me what
Yeah.
you
It's
thought.
real talk. Yeah.
Right, right. I want to. So, what was the positive that you took, and then what was like? Okay, in my school, I'd like to change this, this, and this. So,
Yeah.
what did that look like in your thought process?
Gotcha. So for me, when I started taking classes at your school, it was you or Mr. Carlin on the mat at all times, right? So there was just like an incredibly high level of instruction every day for every class. And I knew that I
Mm-hmm.
could not, I knew that I could not compete on any level with any school in Santa Clarita except for the high level of instruction. So, over the years, of course, as Chatsworth grew, you know, I was one of these people. As Chatsworth grows, you get all these different people who might teach. So the level of consistency in the classes is not always there, right? You might have
Right.
you on the mat or Mr. Carlin, and then you might have a new black belt, or you might have, if it's an adult class, maybe you have just like a higher level, like a red belt or something teaching that day. and that can add to the school, but I didn't have all these other things that I didn't have the culture around that. So I just knew that if I don't have the business acumen that a lot of these people have, if I don't have the size of the mat, I just have to bring Mr. Carlin and Mr. Cox level of instruction every single class, every single day. And that was the one thing that that I could bring. So that's the only thing I could offer and take from your school into mine, really.
Yeah, and which you did. And so part of the, I think, and I know what you're talking about. Part of the things that you probably saw is when myself or something, and we're trying to, in that we're in this, and I'm sure you're experiencing this now with your own people, but
Mhm.
where you don't have quite the level you want, but they're fulfilling something on the mat. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
And then so you know, so you, what's the word I'm trying to say? You settle, I guess. You
yeah,
settle while they try and go through their thing. They're either going to sink or swim.
yeah,
And then you know how it is. You know, you've been around me a long time. If after a while you don't cut it, you know, we're kind of replacing
yeah.
instructors at this point. You know, and you're right. You can't be on the mat all the time. I can't be on the mat all the time. Mr. Carlin can't be on the mat all the time. And so, you know, you have that. That's I mean, that's a really good observation on your part on what you saw, because we see the same thing here, and I'm sure that's why I think, you know, I think one of the things that lacks even in the ATSDA or even in our Tang Soo Do, with the reason Krav is a little more coherent is because we have instructor trainings.
Right. Yeah, I think so.
And you know, I look back on this and I'm like, we're not doing this in the traditional martial arts. And I think that's one thing that I'd like to change that's coming up, that we actually have these for the karate students, because I think I can bring something to the table, and
Yeah.
then you guys can bring something to the table, because then what you did is you guys have watched me, and I've always kind of expanded my horizons, and so has Nathan Carlin, and I've allowed that to happen. And then it looks like you branched off at some point too to your Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which you have
Mhm.
now in your school, right?
Yeah.
And coming every Friday with us as often as you can to enhance your self defense, so that you can put some of this Krav stuff in um, into your curriculum,
Right.
and to make sure that your school can flourish and have students that can defend themselves. So when did your Brazilian Jiu Jitsu come into play? When did you start that?
Yeah. So that started probably about 6 months after I opened. Uh, it was kind of a fluke. Taking a step back, like you mentioned, I always saw you and Mr. Carlin. You guys were obviously masters in Tang Soo Do, but there was always something else you brought in. And for you, Krav Maga was the big thing. Mr. Carlin, his Silat and Dog Brothers and all the stick and knife work. Um, and then, of course, Hapkido for yourself as well. So I was just thinking, well, what is something that I can help if I'm going to be a master in Tang Soo Do and a school owner? What's something I can then bring into the fold to help maybe even spread out to the other schools over time, like we all, kind of do for each other. Um, and jujitsu, I think, was just a natural fit for me. Luckily, at the same time, I had an old friend who I haven't spoken to in 10, 12 years from grade school, actually, named Reggie. He reached out and said, listen, I have a friend's husband who lives in Santa Clarita. He just got his black belt from Alberto Crane at Legacy in Burbank, and he would love to start teaching some classes. So I brought James Uloth in and met with him and ran through a couple things with him, and I thought he would be a super good fit. Um, so we started doing some adult classes first, and with me and only 2 or 3 other people as kind of his first students. And that's kind of how I officially started ranking up in jiu-jitsu about 5 years ago. And I have my blue belt
Mm-hmm.
now, but it's been a really good process to fill in any holes that I thought I had. As martial artists, we're always on this quest to kind of look at what our weak points are. It's easy to lean into what you're good at, but I felt like I personally, when you're a kid and we go to these tournaments, you can just use athleticism to dominate grappling and win, your little trophies that way. But as I became older and adult, and as we started to do those, MMA fights with yourself, the smokers and stuff, I realized there was a big hole in my ground game. So I really wanted to try jiu-jitsu then.
Yeah, that was great. So, and I'm not sure if I don't know if you have it out on YouTube or not, but maybe your students don't know. But you're correct. You did. I don't know. How many did you only do one of the fights in the cage, or what? Did you
I
do more than
did
one?
two of the
You did two,
fights.
right?
Yeah.
And so I remember. And you did you win both of those?
Yeah. I only have one
Yeah.
on video, but I won both of those. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So we had these. You're right. We had these smokers, and we just typical Chatsworth, right? We throw up the cage and we throw down, and we had a
Yeah.
bunch of people here to watch it, and it was definitely a show. I mean, it was, what was that like? What was your experience being in the cage and having to fight? What was that like?
Yeah. The most intense, compact 5 minutes of my life by far. After the first one, I was fighting the same night Michael fought. And it was at Chatsworth because I know we had traveled around a couple of places sometimes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I essentially I went in overconfident because I was fighting a guy who wasn't as experienced, but he was much bigger than me. He was like, he was like 6'3", and maybe 30 or 40 pounds heavier. And I remember you gave me a call and you're like, Patrick, I'm trying to find a fight. Do you want to come in? And I was like, sure. Are we doing like weight classes or anything? And you said, well, he's like 180, but he's going to try and cut down to 170, I think. And I was like, okay. I probably weighed like 145 or 150 at the time. And of course, the day of, he's, if I said 190, that would be generous, So he's a big guy. So he just kind of started bullying me around the ring, just kind of throwing me up against the cage. And he caught me with one body shot that was really hard to recover from. We went to the ground, and so this is what I'm talking about with jiu-jitsu, and I didn't feel comfortable there, and he's throwing punches, and I remember Mr. Conan saying, Patrick, if you don't defend yourself, I'm gonna finish it. Well, that's kind of where the Chatsworth mindset came in, where I'm just like, well, losing is not acceptable. So I managed to throw kind of a weak triangle choke on there, enough to stand back up, and he's leaning against the cage, and I caught a guillotine choke, and we both fell down right as the bell rang. So I wasn't sure what had happened, but he was still out. So I realized I won.
Yeah.
And I remember that I just went after the, celebrating, making sure he was okay, because he's an awesome guy. I just went to the instructor's bathroom and I threw up from from the nerves. And I just laid on that ground for 30 minutes. It was such an adrenaline dump.
Yes.
When you train your whole life, but you never have to actually when there's no holds barred, when you have, there's nothing holding you back, even in like our sparring Monday classes, which could get intense, you're always holding something back. So it's such a valuable experience, I think, as a martial artist to experience and really put yourself in that situation, win or lose, just to see how your mind is going to respond, your body and all that.
Which is great, right? We get these experiences that, Michael will say the same thing with his experiences. And, some of the matches I had, and, it's just like life, right? This is where today's martial arts, you get to talk about that, but if you don't test yourself, and I think that's the thing I love about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, to be honest with you. All right, because here's the thing, man. When you face somebody off the others, there is no audience. There is nothing. There is you and him, and either you're going to sink or swim. He's going to be the better man or woman that day, or you are, and you're going to find out the holes in your game. You're going to find out what kind of character you have. You're going to find out everything else. It's walking life through the mat is exactly what it is. Am I angry? Do I have a poker face? Do I have exposed all the time? Because you know how I am. I hate to lose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't like to play not to win. You know what I mean? So a lot of people do this. They play not to lose. Right. They don't win on purpose. You know what I mean? And so, I think this is what the beauty of martial arts and just your journey at all the stuff that we just talked about, just where you came from, your mental health. I mean, is it not just a fight, just like you were in the cage for 5 minutes? And that 5 minutes can round up what your life was like
Right.
as you graduated school, as you had a heart attack, and then you had to fight that, and then you had to fight your mental health, your dad's death, his mental health problems, as because once you start to grow to be a man and you kind of look back at your parents, right? I've spoken to my own grown children now about this, even in their life, and seeing their lives through their eyes, how it was, me being a single dad. It's there's some brutal talks in that. And so to see all the stuff that you came across, and you still can win a photography contest, is it not a mindset? Right? It
Yeah.
doesn't really matter whatever we approach. I think that's what you're going to tell your students is this is a mindset, man.
Right.
Life is going to throw you bombs. God is going to throw you bombs. I'm telling you right there. He's not going to if you're asking Lord, give me some wisdom, he's going to throw something right in your face and say, okay, here it is, and now what are you going to choose?
Right.
Right? And it's the mat so much like life. I think that's what makes it such a beautiful experience, altogether. It's even at my age, watching you guys, I've said this before, as you guys become more workout partners with me, I know I have the ability to give you guys advice on how to be a better teacher, or how to translate this on the mat when you're having physical difficulties. This is a good way to translate this. Here's some hints. This is what I've learned over the years. That's where I'm at. But to see you guys now get to come in here, and I gotta be on my A game when I wrestle around with you guys, man. It's not like I can just dick around anymore, like I used to. And
Yeah.
so it's fun to have my students become peers and become workout partners, and now we're kind of in this thing together, right? We're all kind of, we've got jiu-jitsu instructors, and we're kind of
Yeah.
plugging back and forth on what that looks like. And I'm sure once we're having a jiu-jitsu tournament in October. We're doing one October 30th. We the great is something off the great pumpkin something or other, whatever it is, right? And so we're going to have a grappling only tournament. And so you know how it's going to be. You're going to
Yeah.
bring your students. I'm going to have mine there. We're going to be super competitive because that's just the way, that's the nature of how we are. And it's just going to be a fun, it's just going to be a fun
Yeah. That'd be
opportunity
awesome.
for everybody. So it's good to see, oh yeah, Dickie. Yeah, here it is. The Grapple Lantern.
Grapple
That's what it's
lantern. I
called.
like it.
I think Dickie came up with that name. It was a good one.
Nice.
So, the, wait a second. Is it the Great Grapple Lantern? The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
Something that you would remember. Our students,
Yeah.
my students don't even know what cartoons are anymore.
I
It drives
know.
me crazy. I'm like, what
I
the
make these
frick, man?
references and they don't even
They have
know what
no
I'm talking
clue. I'm just like, wow, you guys, you missed the whole time. So, but yeah, so this was good for me, as we get to winding down. And I think what with my guests and stuff like that, I think I'd like to see what it's going to look like for you in the future, because now you have a new school.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about to your students and to our audience what it's like to have perseverance, what it's like to have a small school and to go into a bigger location right during the pandemic and you can't even use it.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you end this thing with what it looks like for perseverance for you, and for those that struggle, whether it's mental health, how you overcame that, and
Right.
and your thought process that goes on. Not that we don't have weaknesses, because we all have weaknesses. We all, I say this all the time, right? I should keep it PG, but we always have this beast voice or this little bee voice, right?
Yeah.
Little, biatch voice, right? That comes out. So, and it comes out daily, whether it comes out ever. So why don't you end with that, and why don't you talk to your people?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's interesting because you and I have very different just personalities naturally, but well, I think what connects us is our values are perfectly in line. especially those 5 words that I grew up saying over and over and over again, courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. You know, when you talk about them and think about those enough, they become a part of you. And I've really taken those lessons I've learned from you, um, and I've tried to put them into my school straight away from the very beginning. And I talk about the lessons I've learned from you constantly. And I try to keep my school in line with yours, pretty consistently as far as what you're learning. And even if, we don't teach it exactly the same, overall, what we're learning in this big umbrella is definitely influenced by your school. So I wouldn't be here where I'm at without you. And as far as perseverance goes, you know, there's a saying. It's a pretty famous saying. You've said it to us a lot, but it's talent beats it's hard work beats talent until talent works hard, right? So I have
Mm-hmm.
all these students that may have some natural talent, but they use that talent to as an excuse to be lazy. And I was that way a lot of the time. You talk about the Prager brothers, and we were talented brothers. We had some physical gifts of jumping high and being able to flip and do all this stuff. But there was big periods in my life where I just rode on that and allowed myself to be lazy, both in life and at school and in relationships, and specifically in my martial arts, until I was knocked down by life quite a few times, and I had to lose that attitude of my talent will take me places, and realize that the only thing that's going to take me places is hard work and sacrifice and being willing to take risks. The risk of moving out of my 900 square foot school into a brand new location, double the size, double the rent cost, and then COVID hits, right? And then having the hard work to persevere through that, losing half your students, and how do I deal with that for a year? Besides just working hard, making YouTube videos, running Zoom classes, and giving everyone the best experience I can, until eventually now we're back above our pre-COVID numbers finally. So my message
Yeah.
finally to all my students, I guess, that are listening is, all of you have it in you to put aside your ego and realize that you can be capable of doing great things if you're just willing to put in the hard work.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great ending. It's been great to see. I mean, all of us buckled down during COVID. You're coming back. Surviving Jason Flame and John Vaverka and all of our guys that have these schools. Carson out there. I mean, the no quit attitude showed right up the week that they said we're going to shut down.
Yeah.
And none of us took it. Kemmer, none of us. We were like, okay, we need to figure this out, because we need to. And then now look at the byproduct, what we have, right? Tell me that pandemic did not affect the children whose lives we are.
Great.
I mean, it is a nightmare, dude, to watch them. How out of shape some of them are, and how scared some of them are. How scared they are today. The mask on them all the time. Mask on our kids 24/7, where they don't breathe and they can't. I'm just like, what are we doing here? Can't go to school, and then to see that, trying to work through that, what mental health issues are we going to have down the road because of this thing? Okay, and so it's just been it's been good. This has been I think a really good good interview, as far as people get to know you a little bit more. It was good for me. It's like talking to my children as a grown man now. You know what I mean? So I can hear, get some better feedback from you, constructive criticism from you guys, and I know you guys are a little bit timid on how to do that with me, because if it comes out wrong, you're gonna poke a bear, and then that's just I still have my own issues that I work on when it comes to all that stuff, but. You're doing great. I think you're just been an awesome guy, and I know I get on your case all the time. I remember when you opened up your school, and you're like, well, I don't work on Mondays, Mr. Cox. I'm like, man, I just jumped all over your case. I'm like, what the heck? What do you mean you don't work on Mondays? And I remember having the same conversation with my own son, right? And my son just told me straight up, Michael's like, Dad, all you did is ever work, man. I'm not doing that. I'm going to go on vacations. I'm going to go with my wife on vacations. I mean, he's like telling me what's up. I'm like, man, I'll knock you
Yeah.
out, bro. And, but when I had to come back and listen to that, I'm just, my life was a little bit different, and they grew up in this. They see a very alpha male type of dad that was a single dad, and I had a no quit attitude, and and it was thrown at me just like life was thrown at you. It was thrown at
Yeah.
me, like you're going to sink or swim. And the divorce and everything like that, it just all that did is made me become a better father, which in turn made me become a better instructor. Just like all the stuff that you did, your heart attack, your father passing, Carson's done. All it did is sharpen the sword to make you better men, for us to produce better men and women in this crazy world. And we're not driving Teslas, guys, but we definitely are changing lives, and I wouldn't change it for anything. So
Oh yeah.
proud of you, and I think this is going to be a well listened to. Make sure that you share it. Go back and listen to it. I don't know, is your mom on today? Did she listen to it today or no?
No, she's I think she's actually probably at church, for saying some prayers for my dad's passing. She's always running around, she's a worker.
Yeah. So she'll get to listen to this. So after we're done, just so you guys know, you guys can go subscribe at the YouTube channel. You can always see this. It'll be up on both Real Talk with Mark Cox and on my Facebook. And I will have the audio out for this probably it takes a few hours. I edit a few things out, and then there'll be an audio version of this also that you can just share with everybody. So our interview will be on audio on my audio podcast and on my website, and people can go and listen to it while they're driving and stuff like that. But I would encourage you to listen to this. You guys got, anybody that has some mental health issues, especially males, I know it's weird to say because, even my own children going through that, I'm just like, man, I just didn't have that when I was growing up. You know what I mean? I was like, I probably could have used some counseling, but me, I was like, man, pull your boots up, man, freaking move on, bro. And, you know what I mean? So it's been really good. It's been really good for me and everybody else listening. Patrick, Rick just came on and said Patrick has created a legacy that goes beyond his local school.
Man, Rick is
all right.
Missed. He moved to Utah. He's a military guy. Moved to Utah, but he was a big part of our school. So thank you, Rick.
Yeah, that's good. All right, man. Well, I really enjoyed my time with you. You guys, we'll have this out live for you on audio by the end of day. Hope everybody has an awesome day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Cox.
We'll see you. Awesome. John just said, John Morrell just getting message received loud and clear. Good to see you, John. Awesome. Bye, you guys.